This episode is brought to you by Sable International, building futures beyond borders.
Welcome back to the Relocated South African. My guest today is Olaf Duve, a South African who has built an international career spanning logistics, supply chain, leadership and executive management across South Africa, the UK and Australia. Olaf is in Sydney today, and Olaf, great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad I could join.
Excellent. We always start at the beginning. Where in South Africa are you from originally? Where did you study and so on?
Yeah, well, look, I was born in Germany, but I was literally just popped out in Hamburg and then flew straight back to South Africa. And we were up in Johannesburg. We grew up in Alberton first, and then we moved to Sandton before anything was populated there. It was all just bushveld. So majority is really growing up in Joburg. Went to Sandown High, and then I wanted to get out the house and out the country, not for any particular reason other than just spreading my wings at 17. And Dad said, no, you're a bit young, so let's give you another year and do another year at St. John's just to do some A-levels to get me to 18, so that in his mind I was old enough to then go overseas and start my studies. But yeah, very much a Joburg boy. Yeah, it's been good.
Okay, excellent. And obviously being born in Germany, I assume you've got a German passport.
Yeah, so you got the German passport through birth, and Dad was German and Mom was from South Africa. She was from Joburg. And then we did German school as well. So me and my two brothers, we all grew up with the language. We grew up, bilingual with German and English. A little bit of Afrikaans, obviously, as we all learn in school. But yeah, the German passport, which is obviously handy to get around. Some countries that don't really care, like Australia, it doesn't matter what passport you come in on because it's all about the skills. But Germany was definitely helpful when I left school and then went over to Germany to do my studies.
Okay. And so you went to Germany, and then I know you went to the UK. How did that come about?
Yeah, so look, that mix, so I went to Germany, didn't really have an idea what I wanted to do, to be honest. I grew up there was a family business my dad had of logistics, but being the middle son, I wasn't interested in joining the business yet. I wanted to do my own thing first. So did Germany, did some studies in retail management, and did 2 years in Germany, at which point I'd had enough of all the rules of the Germans. It was a little bit hardcore, and being South African, you like to kind of have a bit more freedom. But did my 2 years, and then I thought, well, I'm not done traveling because, I was only 21. And then I thought, let me go over to England because I had my best friend who was my neighbor from Joburg who was actually living there. So I got the chance to move to London and then do 8 years there and did various jobs. Logistics wasn't really part of my CV back then. But I went to London, did all my travels, as young people do. And it was just London's such a great base to, get around, enjoy the vibe of London, be a young person and just do everything you can do from there. And then did various jobs, still trying to find my way, did retail, did some recruitment, did some financial services. I really got stuck into different industries until I could really make my way, and start my logistics path. And that only happened 10 years after leaving South Africa for the first time, when I returned back to South Africa, and then I joined the logistics trade.
Okay, that's quite interesting because, I get the sense that a lot of young South Africans, especially in those early 2000s, they were able to get into the UK on those sort of, temporary work visas. And it was relatively easy. And a lot of them went there and did all kinds of jobs. It sounds almost like you were a bit more career-oriented when you were there, already looking at building something rather than just having a job.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't, firstly, the German passport was handy that obviously I could go as a permanent, resident. I didn't have my 2-year visa where you had to go do a Contiki tour and then get back to South Africa kind of thing. So I could actually take my time. And yeah, a career path, not really. I think I'm a typical 20-year-old who didn't really know what he had to do, but you just fall into things, you try different things. And what we are obviously being German is with the upbringing we had is that we are very clear and dedicated in particular directions. So when you start a job, I stayed in it for 2 years. I built a career, but ultimately I used the money just to travel and, to enjoy the first world things that you enjoy in London and the countries around it. So the focus was really about just having a joy and having fun and then getting to see the world as much as you could. And the
Yeah.
career, the serious stuff only really kicked in when you start thinking, okay, I've done my 10 years in Europe. I've done everything I want to, and, I want to now settle down, maybe have a family. And for that, South Africa is definitely a much better country than doing it in Europe, to be honest.
Okay, because I was going to ask, I mean, a lot of people, and thinking about your situation, you
Mm.
obviously had um, all of the benefits of a foreign passport. You could travel and move around. You didn't have to go to South Africa for any reason.
Yeah.
So did you see a lot of opportunity, or was there doubt in your mind in terms of should I stay in Europe or go back to South Africa?
No, the driver really is weather. You might have other podcast guests that are living there. And for me, coming from South Africa and the reason we're in Australia further down the chain is the weather. It's really tough to be in a European climate. The only way I got through living in London and Germany for 8 years or 10 years is heading back to South Africa every December, January to see my parents and to get some sunshine. It was really the only way of, I think, breaking up that winter because, mentally it can be tough and it's dark and all those things that people know about. That's the trade off, maybe, if you choose Europe as the country that you live in permanently. And while there's a lot of positives, it was just, I think I've had enough. I achieved everything I wanted to in terms of travel and enjoying things that Europe had to offer. But then it was time to go back and the career focus thing clicked into gear where I thought, okay, what am I really going to do with my life? And then, of course, every time you go back on holiday, you sit with mom and dad and you think, well, what do I want to do? What is the business doing? What are my other brothers doing? And it just became a natural evolution that when I moved back, there was a chance to open up the branch in Durban. And that just opened up the door to saying, okay, I think it's time that we head back and I've got a clear path of what I want to do.
Okay. And were you married at that time?
No, not married. So just lived the single life in Europe and then got back to South Africa, focused on opening up the logistics arm in Durban, the family business. And then eventually met the sister of one of my best friends in Durban at a New Year's Eve party, as you do, and the rest is history. And that's where you meet the wife. She's actually from the Free State. So
Okay.
being in Durban, it wasn't really an obvious matchup, but that's how the long distance relationship started. And we're still together now, we're about, 18 years later.
Oh, wow. Amazing. So, and then, I mean, in a family business working in South Africa, it must have been quite a difficult decision to go to Australia.
Yeah, you say that, Jan. My decisions in life are usually pretty easily made. They just come out of nowhere. The decision to move to Australia is just having a braai with a friend in Durban and him casually mentioning, we're looking to move to Australia. We all had young kids at the time, like 3, 4 years old. And that's usually the push is that if you have younger kids, you're thinking about what are we going to do for them? And he just mentioned it casually, over the braai. He said, look, we're going to maybe move to Melbourne or something. He thought, why don't you guys have a look as well? So I thought, okay, well, it's interesting. I'd done 12 years in the family business and grown the business to a really decent size with my brothers. And then we actually sold the family business to a big German company. And that's put us in a good financial position, maybe, of selling the business that way. But we knew that with the 3 young kids that it was time to move or just have a look. So he mentioned it, and I thought I'd never been to Australia before, but let's go have a look. So I booked a flight, came over for a week because with Australia, I had no way of getting into the country other than being sponsored by a company in Australia. because I had no, formal degree like university, like a high qualification. And the passport, like I said, Australia doesn't care. It's really about what you're going to bring to the country. So I thought, well, I tried to apply for jobs, but in Australia, like most countries, if you try to apply online, you're not going to get interviewed. You're just too far away. You've got local competition. And so I just booked a flight for a week. And in a typical sales fashion, I said I'm in the area. And I was. And when I was there, they then made time for me. I had about 4 or 5 interviews. And in that week I was there was one position that opened up to head up the ocean freight team of a big freight forwarding company. And 3 months later, we had moved. Me, the wife, the kids, the cats, everyone had come across.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah. And the
amazing.
friends that mentioned, the idea put the seed in our head to move, they only moved to Melbourne about 3 years after us because it took a bit
Okay,
longer for
wow.
them.
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
does. I get the impression that a lot of South Africans, especially, the visa process is not that easy, and it does take time.
Yeah, but every
What?
country is like that, yeah. Even if you want to move to South Africa, we had people in our business as a family where he was European, and to get him to be permanent in South Africa, you also have to jump through hoops. Every
Mm.
country is trying to protect its own people and has its laws in place with usually the right intention. So yeah, you just got to jump through the hoops or choose your opportunity and be careful of things like how old you get before you make the jump. Like in Australia, once you hit 45, gets a bit trickier because the government is wondering how much of a burden is this person going to be, or how much value are they going to add to the society. So yeah, you have to look at all those little things in each country.
If we think back to arriving in Australia, how different
Mm.
was that for you from, for instance, you'd previously been to live in Germany and the UK. How different was that for you? And now with a family, wife and kids, how hard was that first 6 months?
Yeah, well, look, that is different. So this is country number 4 for me, but the difference is that this time I moved with the whole family. So before going to Germany, I had a suitcase. When I went to England, I had maybe 2 suitcases. It was easier. And kudos, to be honest, to the wife because, she's the one who had to deal with the brunt of the change. And I think a lot of people maybe don't acknowledge that or see what happens because in South Africa, you've got your maids and your nannies and you've got that lifestyle around you. And, the kids were, I think, 3 and 5 when we came over. And then she had to shift from being a full-time working mom with help and with family support that you leave behind to now just being a full-time mom and staying at home. And, there's a big challenge around that. So I would say that challenge and getting used to the new country and leaving your country behind of South Africa, I would say you need to give that 2 years to really become
Mm.
comfortable. That's what we found. But to answer the question, the difficulty for me, because I've done changes before, it wasn't that difficult. I was the one working, I was going out, and I was getting my own kind of fix of being working and being out the house in the environment. I was being productive. But, the kids adjust. They usually do. I find maybe the moms and the wives, they have the brunt of dealing with it, and you just got to support them in that. But that's also why I
Mm.
said jokingly earlier that the cats, they moved as well. That was part of the deal. The cats must come with because mentally it's good to have your pets and we left the dogs behind, but we brought the cats and they were good to have some kind of, when you move to keep something that you understand and part of your house. We moved our furniture, luckily the company paid for everything. Um, so there was a lot of that to try to make it easy. I got to the point where I even bought the same car in Australia that we had in Durban, so that when we got there, the kids thought, oh, well, nothing's changed. So just little stuff that we could
Okay.
accommodate and just make the change easier. But when you're in Sydney, the change itself isn't that difficult. I really find, and you hear it a lot of the time. For me, Sydney is very close to Johannesburg in terms of economics, the weather itself. Brisbane is very much like Durban, and Cape Town and Melbourne have a huge similarity in culture as well. So it's interesting. We're thousands of k's apart from each other, but when you move here, there's a lot of things where you're driving and you think, oh, this is just like Pretoria, or this street is just like this place. And Yeah, it's quite common, and that's why so many South Africans move to Oz, and they think, look, it's pretty comfortable, pretty easy. Not exactly the same. You aren't with your tribe, as we like to call it. The people are different, and there's things you have to adjust to. But that's for me is fun. When you move countries, you explore different things and you enjoy different things. But you also look for the commonalities and similarities. And in Australia, of course, there's plenty South Africans, so you hear the accent quite often, or you have a SAFA shop, and that's good. Again, we didn't particularly gravitate towards South Africans. Just because you're from the same country doesn't mean you're going to be best buddies. But there is, if you hear someone, you have a bit of a chat, but you also settle in the country and assimilate as best you can by just integrating with the cultures and the different countries of the people that have moved here. And that's, it's quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean that's very interesting. The similarities. I always joke, and I say there's two things missing, maybe three if you're from Joburg:
Yeah.
car guards, Hardy does, and Parktown prawns.
Yeah, yeah. And we were back in January this year in Joburg, and we had the hardy dolls. We didn't see the prawns, and yeah, there was lots of car guards.
Yeah. So, I mean, just two comments on that initial move. I always hear this from people that it's critically important for people to have a strong relationship when you make this move, because if you have a bad relationship with your partner or wife, that change is not going to talk about it again. Is not going to. Come on, if that move is not going to make the relationship stronger. Yeah, you're reliant on each other. You've got to be strong in that. And the other question was just, at the time when you came to Australia, how long ago was that?
So it's about coming up to 10 years now.
Okay. So there must have already been some Facebook groups and some SAFA groups, because people always say that the Australia move is sometimes a soft landing because there are so many South Africans. Was that your experience? Did you have a lot of benefit from that, from meeting people and getting that kind of support?
Yeah, well, look, like I said, we didn't make a conscious choice to avoid or seek out South Africans. So to be honest, we didn't really look for those groups or join them as such. If we heard the accent, so one of my very close friends, I was just looking for kindergartens in the area, and a lady behind me heard the accent and she reached out and said, I'm from South Africa. As it happened, they were literally 2 houses down the road from where we were first renting. And we just went over, had a coffee. They were a South African family. And that initial connection has led me to my main group where, it's my poker gang, where we're all South Africans except for one token Aussie. But outside of that, I've never really made strong South African friends. We hear them, but most of our other friends, and it's quite normal. It's your kids that kind of define the parents of their friends, and that becomes your friend circle. And because of the nature of Australia and Sydney, because it's such an immigrant-heavy country, we have a few Aussie friends, but half at least are, Indian or Chinese or Japanese or whatever, or New Zealander. And then there might be a South African in there too. So to answer your question, the soft landing, no, not really. We didn't lean on that network. But saying that, we do make sure we get our biltong and we go and get our South African staples that way. And then, of course, if we hear South African accent, we will turn around and say, oh, you're from here. Or, you're far away from home, something like that. So, yeah, you make that connection. But I think when you're overseas, you just try and find the connection with wherever they're coming from.
Yeah, I must say the one thing I found with, for me when we moved, was that I thought because people are also from South Africa, we're naturally going to be friends because we all left, we're almost the same. And to my almost disgust, I learned that that's not the case. You
Okay.
gravitate towards people with the same values. Leaving South Africa doesn't,
Yeah.
give you particular values. So that
No,
was
but when
quite an
there's rugby
interesting
or
one.
soccer, then then we come
Big time.
together, and then you can't hide your DNA. When you're down in with my area in Bella Vista, there's a hotel or pub there, and then that's where we watch the World Cups and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So when that happens, then definitely there's a real bonding, and you've got your rugby jersey, or your colors come out, all that kind of thing. You might see a South African flag on a car, and you feel something, and you feel it's not like you hoof past and wave at the people, because then you just might be weird, and people don't understand why you're excited to see a flag on a car. But there is that element still. You never forget where you're from.
No, absolutely. And next year the World Cup's in Australia, isn't it? So
Yeah, so I've got
Rugby
my
World
tickets. Got to make sure that I've bought a few. Of course, everything in Australia is expensive, and that's not excluded. But it's not. I haven't been to a World Cup for rugby before in that way live. So I thought, well, while it's here, you better just take the chance and get some tickets. So I'll have to choose my favorite child and take them with, and we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, absolutely have to go.
Yeah,
It's amazing. I was at the 95 one, and that will always be a special thing to remember.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you you talk about you said that Australia is expensive, and that kind of leads me to the next question. Your sense of, and maybe it's better now after 10 years, but the shock of the cost of living initially, was that quite hard for you?
I think what people need to understand, it's kind of a generic thing, like a first world country, whether it's Europe or Australia, what you find is that the property is always really expensive. The cars are relatively affordable for when you're earning the salary in that country. And then the food is what it is. It's up to you if you want to shop at the local here for equivalent Pick and Pay, or whether you want to go shop at Woolworths. You pay for what you get. So you can adjust your standard of living depending on what you want. So no, we adjusted. I'm being quite careful with my money, which my kids always nag me about, that I'm being too tight again, and that they don't get enough pocket money. But you just have to be careful, like in any first world country, whether it's London or Germany or wherever. Australia is the same. You just got to watch your cash, just be a little bit smart about things. And yes, 10 years later, we've now bought our house, and like a lot of people bought an investment property. So, we work hard, and we use that money. And the nice thing, as we know, is that, that when you're paying your taxes, it's going towards other stuff like schooling, which then helps ease the burden on the household income. But saying that, when you move, it is expensive. Even when we went back in January, you're still comparing prices and checking. South Africa's still better value overall. And I know because my two brothers are still in South Africa, and that they have a better lifestyle overall, given the country, despite the challenges. But we're happy with our choice, So we live here, we pay more, and that's fine. We're earning in dollars, so we can pay in dollars. And you just got to watch what you spend. And then the big thing we noticed is that when we bought the house, we had to then, of course, get rid of properties in South Africa so we could just get together a nice deposit for an Australian house. And Sydney being particularly tough. So that's kind of what hits you. But ultimately, if you've made the call that you're going to move permanently, then you just move your assets out, you move it, across, you get the exchange rate, which hurts you hard. And then you just got to settle. You've got to make the call and then just move with it. But saying that, I've got lots of people also who had been here 10 years, got their passports, and then just last year, a friend and his family moved back to South Africa because they thought for their own family unit, they needed to be back with family. As it happened for them, it didn't last long because he couldn't find work back in South Africa, being a 50-year-old man, white male. And that's just what happened in their case. So they actually ended up moving here. And that was financially an expensive thing for them to do, moving backwards and forwards. But everyone's situation is different, Jan, just because for us, this works. My kid brother, he's another example. He was in Germany for over 10 years. And then he moved back to South Africa as well. So, everyone has their own things that they're looking for in life.
That's so true. I mean, the one thing I've learned with this podcast as well, that you cannot judge anybody. People are very easy to judge. There's a lot of South Africans that are very critical of people who have left, people who stay behind, and and then the other end, there's people that go and say bad things about South Africa to kind of justify. I just think, you make your call and you go with it. You don't have to justify it to anybody. And the same thing,
Yeah.
if you can't go, don't be negative about people who do go, but just it's just not something to do. It's not right to judge people. But
Yeah.
back to the financial question. So you kept some financial um, assets in South Africa. But were you always of the view that this was a permanent move? You're not going to go back?
Yeah, well, that's where, as we all know, the wife actually makes the call. I was the one who made the decision to move. And then I went back about 6 months after moving the first time to Australia. So in early 2017. And I just made the comment to her and I said, it'd be interesting to see when I go back, to see family, what I think of South Africa now. And she says, why? What do you think? And I said, well, just interested to see what I feel. And she says, well, we're not going back. So that was the end of that discussion, because I wasn't mean
Okay.
anything like I might move back, but she had, despite being pulled across and going through the hardship of the change, she already knew that this was where we need to be and this was the right decision for the family. Now, saying that, yes, we know that we're happy here and we've got our citizenship just a few weeks ago. So we're now fully Aussie and not going anywhere. But when we went back in January and people still ask me here, I still say South Africa is the best country to live overall. So I can still live here and be happy, but I can still make the call that in South Africa, if you ignore things like the crime or the politics, that for lifestyle and quality of life and everything that goes around it, I still think South Africa has the best to offer overall. And when, I know when you go on holiday, you have a kind of tinted glasses, because you're with family and you don't have to worry about stuff and you're just on holiday. So any of the negative things you can just kind of put away. But yeah, we always have a great time. And all my friends here from our poker gang that go back, we all have a great time. And every visitors that we know here that are not South African that go on safari or go to Cape Town or Durban or wherever, they always come back and think, we've got no idea why you guys complain so much about your country. We think it's awesome. We can't wait to go back again. So that still holds true, that South Africa is a great place. But again, for what you want to get out of it, and then you must choose a country that works for you.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the biggest lines that we find through every conversation is obviously the family thing. How hard is that for you guys to navigate? Because, and it's always great when things are okay, when your parents are okay and you speak to them on a regular basis, but people get older and so on. So that's something that I find everyone really battles with, especially because of the distance. It's not just hop on a plane.
No, and that is the tough one. So on the one hand, I've got my brothers there. We're very close, so they miss that, not seeing my kids. And the trip in January was very useful for that, for reconnecting at a deep level. And then Nikki, her family is still in the Free State, and they're both elderly and they've got nobody around them. So that is a concern now, where we think, well, so her one brother is here with us in Sydney and her other brother's in Dubai. So, well, what do you do now? Because the parents are there. The dad had a heart condition, a heart attack, like a few months ago. And we're all stressing, what do we do? Who's going to fly over? Who's going to look after them? And yeah, that is the reality. Now, saying that, the option then is like, okay, well, why don't we pull them over to Australia? Now, firstly, it's a very expensive thing to do. Like, we're talking, tens of thousands of Aussie dollars to sponsor and get them across, because the government will look at them as a health risk and a burden. And also, I've seen friends do this where they've pulled their parents over because there's nobody. So when the parents come here in their 70s and 80s, they actually don't enjoy being here, because their entire life is in South Africa. That's what they know. They can't make that adjustment in the late years of their life. So it's a mixed bag. I've heard of one exception where it's actually they're enjoying it with people that have moved here, but I would say by and large, probably I would not be keen on doing it. I just think it's too much to pull people out of their environment, and rather just make up another plan about how do we look after our parents in South Africa, you know?
That's very true. And it's I heard somebody say the other day there's a cost and a price of immigration. So, the cost is the visa, the flights, the fees, and all the things that you have. But the price you
Yeah.
pay is that funeral you can't attend, or a birthday, or a wedding, or something, just because it's too far. And that's the kind of, price you pay for a better future for children. And that's what a lot of people do. So people get pushed, others get pulled. But it, I guess that's the reality of immigration, is that one has to try and deal with that.
Yeah, there's always a cost, no matter what choice you make, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Olaf, maybe just another question on life there. I'm quite interested in your views on, the working life in Australia. How do you find that in comparison to South Africa?
Yeah, that's interesting. So specifically for my field in logistics, firstly, when you move to Australia and in logistics, so I look after, the import of containers and road freight around the country. First thing you need to understand is that the Aussies, they will only trust or think you know what you're talking about when you've been here for a few years. Just because you've been in that field overseas, the Aussies here have got a very clear view that our country is unique and different. And it is. The geography of the landscape just means you need to understand things, that the way we move things around is massively different to any other country. So even to the degree that the Aussies also, that if you look at a multinational country, just because they have a head office in Europe that says, okay, this is how we're doing it globally, the Aussie subsidiary will kick back and say, no, we're Australia, we do things the way we want. Thank you very much. So there's that real deep rooted kind of identity that our country is so different that we're going to kind of do it the way we want to. And if you're going to kind of get credibility and build up a network, you need to prove yourself, and you have to just really learn about how the country works. So that's challenging. Even to the point when I moved, in South Africa, you get multiple languages and different types of cultures, but within the African community. Whereas when you come to Australia, I had a team reporting to me of about 15 different countries. So whether it's from Brazil and South America and Japan and China and Canada and European people. So you've got all these people under you, and okay, we can deal with people who speak different languages in South Africa, but it's totally different when the actual culture and the way they were brought up and the way they think is totally unique. So you have to be careful, especially as a South African, because we're known to be hard workers. We're known to be good employees, generally speaking, but we're also very direct. And I found out early on, I've got to be careful how I say stuff. I'm being too clear cut, and I think I'm not saying anything wrong, but I'm saying it in the way that a South African employee can take it. And here it's like, why are you talking to me like this? And you make them feel very bad about themselves, or you're not respecting them. And so that's the tough thing in terms of working life, is how you adjust to the Australian, not even Australian, because most of the people are not Australian. They're from another country. And then, of course, the other flip side is that I'm just thinking now, the real positive I saw straight away is that when somebody is expected to do a job, they just get on and do with it. So you don't need to baby them. You don't need to monitor them. Whereas in South Africa, there is a lot more motivating them, watching that they're not taking it easy, that they're actually doing what you're paying them to do. So there's a real ownership here, and there's a lot of freedom, I guess, as an executive or manager, that you can just give people direction, and you can just trust most of the time that they're just going to get on with it and do the job. So that's really enjoyable, from a work perspective. It also means that even now, every job I do, the expectation is on me that I must do what I'm told to do or what's expected. You can't just take it easy and coast around because the entire business is on the basis that everyone does their job. And that's why the country, I guess, works the way it does, because everyone kind of comes through on that expectation. So that was the biggest thing, is getting credibility, learning the country, and then of course making sure that you do what you're supposed to do, because that's really why the country is, I think, so successful, is because that value system is right through the country at all levels.
Yeah. The- when I used to be there and do work there, I always found it was a very formal environment. Is that your experience as well? The work
No, not at
environment?
all. Not at all.
Okay. Oh,
It's
really?
it's no, it's open shirts. It's, obviously if you incorporate an environment, then you might go with a jacket on. But even that, no, things are very relaxed. Today I saw some of the guys on internal meeting. It's Fridays, so they're a bit more relaxed. No, things in Sydney, and I think it's probably the Aussie way. People think that Aussies are more relaxed. They're very easy to talk to, and that is very much, even in Melbourne or Sydney, which are the big business areas. And maybe it's relaxed over years, that no, things are not so serious, and we're just here to talk. And yes, you need to be respectful, and you do need to, come across professionally. There is that element, but I find that the business attitude is probably very similar to South Africa. Maybe not
Okay.
as friendly or personable as South Africa, maybe just one notch down.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm
Yeah.
talking late 90s in the banking industry, and Australia
Mm,
went through some interesting history at that time. So they became very focused on compliance and doing the right thing after some scandals that happened there. So, yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, you'll
Um,
see the clips where the prime minister's on the lawn and the guy comes out and gives him a shout and on the news. Yeah, things are pretty relaxed over here. Nobody's taken too seriously.
okay. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, we kind of getting towards the end. I think you've answered the question in terms of not seeing yourself going back to South Africa. One never says never, but you
Mm.
kind of decided that this is your home now.
Yeah, I've actually just recently I looked on YouTube. I've been seeing some videos about what does it mean to retire in South Africa and things like that. I'm in my early 50s, so I've got another like at least 5 or 10 years to go before I need to kind of think about that. And I've also got to get the kids through high school and university, so I need to stay gainfully employed for the next 10 years or so to get that done. But yeah, if I look at those and what people do, and even my brother, my older brother, he thinks like, where will he retire? Will it be in South Africa or over in Europe, given the passport and the option? And retiring in South Africa is an interesting thing to do. But I don't know, at the moment, I'm thinking probably because my kids are here, they will probably stay here for studies and stuff. So we're not going to move countries in terms of economic reason, or because we think the lifestyle is better there. So when I said earlier that South Africa is still the best country for me, I mean, Australia is a close second. It's just that we don't have the help around the house and those kind of things. That's the only thing we're really missing. But for everything else, in terms of safety and climate and what you have around you, no, South Africa, and also things like aged care and that kind of thing, it's a huge industry here. And from that perspective, and in terms of health, yeah, you would stay in Australia. So I think that's where we are, and we just have to kind of suss out, well, where would we be, me and the wife, and where do the kids go? So it's all those usual questions we've got to ask about what do we do in
Mm,
10 plus years. But moving back to South Africa, no, it would just be for holidays and things like that.
okay.
Yeah.
And Olaf, maybe last question. If you could sit down with yourself when you first arrived almost 10 years ago in Australia, what advice would you have given yourself knowing what you know today?
Nice. I think just be grateful
Maybe,
and don't get so stressed,
yeah,
because you come over here and you think, the move is such a big move. You've taken, made such big changes. And I think sometimes I'd catch myself doing the right thing if I'd be walking to the train station. And you just got to look around and, for the old saying of, smell the roses and just appreciate the situation you're in. And I think you can probably do that no matter where you are, is whether you're in South Africa, whether you're anywhere else. Just appreciate the decision you've made and enjoy the benefits of where you are. I think that's really just a key thing people need to do and not stress so much about, have I made the right call and what will I do here? Just you're in your life, try and enjoy it and make the best of it, I think.
Absolutely. I think that's very, very sound advice. And to a young person with a young family today thinking about immigration, what would you say?
I'd say, look, if you're thinking it, then yeah, I think you should do it, Ideally, if you can, go and investigate first. Make sure you're not doing it just because of, an insecurity or an anger you're feeling in South Africa. If you're looking, that something's pushing you out. I think just make sure you're going in with eyes wide open. And earlier I made the comment, and it's very similar to having a baby. If you and the partner are together, don't think that moving countries is going to solve issues, because it's going to give you more challenges. You've got to be very stable and very sure that this is what you want for your unit and for your life. So there's also lots of people I talk to who are in South Africa, and even just on the trip now, they were in the Free State, best friends of my wife. And they said, look, we think about moving and we hear how things are, and they've got a young boy. And I said, well, why? And I started questioning them about the reasoning. And I told them, no, you must stay. You've got no reason to move. You've got a good setup. You've got a good family network. You've got good jobs. You're living in the Free State, which doesn't have as much issues. So I think case by case, don't leave just because other people are doing it.
That's very true. That herd mentality, and immigration is not necessarily the right thing, as you say, for everybody.
No, why?
Very, very sound advice. Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your story, man. It's really an amazing journey, and it sounds like you guys are on a good thing there in Australia. So well done.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I could see it was the podcast you did with Rob Mailage a few months ago, because I met him in London of all places, and we're still in touch. So it's interesting when I saw his interview, and I reached out and I thought, no, let's have a talk, because everyone's got their story and different things, and like I say, just enjoy your life.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome, and thank you so much for sharing and reaching out. I really appreciate it.
No worries, Jan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And to everyone listening, if today's episode resonated with you, please share it with a fellow South African wherever they are in the world. You can find more episodes on our website or your favorite platform. Until next time.
This episode is brought to you by Sable International, building futures beyond borders.